Hey, it's Sam, and I'm making a quick follow-up to my election prediction, where I predicted that Biden would win. I'm going to go over sort of quickly. I'll give a link to it and mainly sum up the prediction. I broke down the election prediction on several criteria, and I said very clearly that Biden would win. It would be over. It would be easier than we think, and it would be over relatively quickly, especially when we consider counting votes. I'm going to go over that in a second, but I also want to do a follow-up because now we're in this state of limbo because Trump isn't conceding. There's a lot of confusion about what might happen and whatnot, and I also wanted to just take it forward from there and in a sort of political, talk about the politics of the elections and stuff like that, and also the astrology that's upcoming. So first, I want to just show something that's a little bit that should be kind of obvious, but of course it's not, because a lot of people haven't studied this stuff very well, or there's a lot of false equivalence happening because that's the world we live in. Well, this is a really good chart that shows the difference between what happened in 2000 between Bush v. Gore and that, quote, disputed election, and what's happening now. And we should understand something, that this election really is not close by most standards. 2016 was much closer, at least as far as vote counts and whatnot. And we knew it at the time, and Hillary Clinton quickly conceded because she also knows the reality of things like voter fraud, recount totals and stuff like that. And plus she's used to sacrificing for the good of the country and not just hanging in there for other purposes. But in 2000, we had one state that was contested, and the whole election revolved around one state, which was Florida. So you can see this is a very good graph. It says number of states where vote is contested. There was one in 2000. There are 6 in 2020, and Trump would need to pretty much flip almost every one of them, or we just got the vote totals, and they finally officially called Georgia, and they officially called Arizona yesterday. A few news outlets already had, but we've been able to see for about a week now that it was probably going to be 306 for Biden to 232, I think, for Trump. By the way, that's exactly the same total that Trump won by in 2016 when he won the Electoral College. So Biden, he's going to hold on to these states. I'm going to go through why. But so but in 2000, you had one state. The whole election hinged on this state. Now we have 6 states. Again, all 6 pretty much have to go against Trump. So all 6 of at least 4 or 5 of those have to go for Trump. He can't win without Pennsylvania. He can't win without Georgia. The vote totals in all these in Arizona as well, he would need like every one of those to go in his favor. The votes separating the candidates in 2000, it was 537 votes in Florida, well within the margin of a recount. Recounts never have more than a few hundred votes shifted. There was a recount in 2016 of a state. By the way, Jill Stein ordered the recount. It was Wisconsin, and it changed a couple hundred votes. The vote total was about 10,000 in Wisconsin, which, the percentage was way less than 1%, but the vote totals was about 10 or 11,000 that Trump won in 2016. The recount changed about 200 votes. This is typical for recounts. Again, so in Florida, or in 2000, it was one state, 537 votes. The margin of the contested state was like 0.1%, right? It was virtually even. Within 5 to 10 million votes, there was only 530 that were contested. And now, again, totally different. You got tens of thousands of votes in 6 states. They all need to go against Biden. So tens of thousands of votes have to be overturned in 6 states. There's nothing even close. There's no comparison. I mean, we have to use our discrimination, and there's no comparison to a few hundred votes in one state where the whole election hinges upon, or tens of thousands of votes in 6 states where we've never seen a recount that even changed 1,000 votes, I don't think. This is tens of thousands, even in the best case scenario, which I think is Georgia or maybe Arizona. I think Arizona might be about 12,000 at this point. Georgia's maybe about 14,000. Pennsylvania is 50,000. Michigan is 150,000. So it's not going to happen. And again, this is it's virtually impossible. As you can see, instead of 0.1%, it's 0.3%. Again, this is 1/10 of 1%. This is 0.3%, which is 3% of 1%. So again, it's not even close of what these margins are. Again, the Electoral College margin, it says 5 and 65 here. Again, the National Popular Vote margin, Al Gore actually won by 540,000 votes in 2000. Trump is already losing by more than 5 million votes. So even the popular vote, he's getting trounced. It's, not close. Again, Hillary Clinton in 2016 already had known she was going to win the popular vote by millions on election night, and she still conceded because she knows election math. She knows the good of the country. She's a gracious loser. And for the benefit of all, she conceded and said, okay, it's over. This is why in a democracy and in a land where there's grace and where we have a certain amount of goodwill toward each other, the loser bows out gracefully so that his supporters and so that the country can heal the divide. We don't have that now, but we shouldn't be creating a false equivalence. So again, these are some other things down here, but we can't lose sight of this. This is really important that we understand the perspective and what's going on. This wasn't the media. The media didn't declare Donald Trump. This is all propaganda. This is propaganda. And people repeating the propaganda is dangerous. Donald Trump also came out on election night and said, I already won. Again, people that are repeating the propaganda that the media doesn't declare the winner and it's fraud and all this, this propaganda came from the person who came out on election night when nothing was even close to decided and said, I already won. And he said, I already won, so stop counting the votes where I'm ahead and keep counting the votes where I'm behind. And it's rigged. And he was saying it was rigged for months because he was trying to rig it. And again, I haven't forgotten this. This has been happening for months. He intentionally defunded the post office, slowed down mail delivery, which again, we're not even talking about that part anymore because Biden overcame it, which I thought he would do. I'm going to get to my prediction in a minute. But the strategies to slow down voting, to slow down counting mail-in votes was a strategy. It wasn't by chance. Pennsylvania could have been counting mail-in ballots for weeks before the election, but the Pennsylvania legislature, in coordination probably with the White House, decided to pass a law or to provide a ordinance that said we're not going to count votes until election day. We're going to let them pile up and then start counting on election day instead of early. Why? Because he wanted to create this impression of the thing we saw. It was orchestrated. And that's exactly what happened. Is he was ahead on election night, and then he knew that lead would disappear, and he wanted to be able to say, see, they're trying to steal it from us. This was a coordinated effort. And let me just alert you to something. Again, maybe you weren't paying attention. I was. But on election night, I didn't hear anyone complaining. I didn't hear him complaining about Biden's big lead in Ohio and Florida disappear. Do you know why that happened? On election night, Biden was winning Ohio. He was up by about 10 points with more than 80% of the vote in. A lot of people were going, wow, Biden might win Ohio. He's up by 10 points with 80% of the vote in. And then you know what happened? The lead went, do you know why? Because Ohio counted mail-in votes early. So when Ohio started releasing their numbers on election night, the first things they released was the mail-in ballots. And because more people voted mail-in for Biden, Biden's numbers were very high early in Ohio and in Florida. Biden was also it was sort of neck and neck, but Biden was holding his own in Florida for quite a while because they had already counted the mail-in ballots before Election Day in Ohio and Florida. These are two. There are a few others. But Ohio in particular, for me, was really noteworthy. And then what happened is once they started counting the in-person vote in Ohio, Biden's lead just disappeared. You saw all the counties, all of the late reporting in Ohio on election night was all for Trump. 75% for Trump, 75% for Trump. And Biden's lead just disappeared. So again, nobody was complaining about voter fraud when it was Biden's lead being disappeared or, disappearing because of vote count. So again, all of this is kabuki theater, and it's amazing that people just fall for this. So again, I'm just going to be honest about it. And so this is where it's at right now. Okay, what's happening now has been known. This has been known and gamed out again, even for months. How many people said for months that expect this on election night? Okay, so I want to go to the prediction that I made. Bring it up here. One second. Oops. Let me bring it up here. And where is it? I'm sorry. 1 second. Here it is. Sorry about that. 1 second. Okay. So I'm just going to, I have a long blog post. I also did YouTube videos and whatnot. A long article about where I gamed out the whole thing. You should watch it. Overall election weather, candidates charts, current dashas, major transits on election day and whatnot. I talked about all that, how Biden wins, how Trump wins, other non-astrology factors. I talked about the polling and other kinds of things. But then we'll get to my prediction here. And here's my prediction. Here's what I said. I said Biden wins and could wrap it up on election night or no later than the following few days. On election night, keep an eye on North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia. These have been big. He flipped them too. Iowa and or Florida. If two or more of these states go to Biden, it could be all but over. He's leading in almost all those states and has for months. Either way, I think it'll be over by Friday, November 6th, when the moon passes over Trump's Saturn, Venus, and Biden's exalted Jupiter and hits in aspects with the opposition with Saturn. I'll talk about that in a second when I bring up the chart. But you can see this is exactly when we knew pretty much for sure that Biden had won. On that Friday night, Biden had planned a speech, and he had thought it would be a victory speech, but the networks and the mathematicians weren't comfortable enough to declare it yet. By the way, I just want to back up because I started to say something earlier, but then I got a little off. The networks didn't declare Trump or, declare Biden the winner. Math did. Math declared Biden the winner, which means at some point, all of that math became obvious to everyone. We can do math. Most of us can do math, and we still know math. And we understand election margins, recounts, 6 states having to flip by tens of thousands of states or by tens of thousands of votes. People understand this. Usually what happens is candidates also understand, and they do like what Hillary Clinton did in 2016, and they concede at that point for the good of the country. Trump hasn't done it yet. Instead, he's came out and made baseless claims of fraud. None of this fraud is going to overturn overturn enough votes. No matter what people think, it comes down to votes. Tens of thousands of votes need to be overturned in these states. That's all that's going to change anything. Tens of thousands of votes need to be overturned in these states. Coming up and claiming fraud, massive widespread fraud, and now we're going to throw all these votes out, or now we're going to say, oh, there was fraud, so Trump wins Pennsylvania. None of this is fantasy land. I don't know how people think this is going to game out, but votes need to be changed. It all comes down to votes. The best you do is you recount, and tens of thousands of those votes need to be changed. There's already mandatory recounts happening. It's not going to change enough votes for Trump to win. People know this, at least not legally. When the votes are counted, Biden will have won the Electoral College and the vote count by more than 5 million votes. It was a reality and an inevitability a week ago. at this time it became inevitable, right? And so normally the loser would have conceded, and the media reports that. Short of him conceding, the media still has to report the numbers because we know the outcome, and we want to know the outcome. So again, this is just propaganda. Propaganda. It's been stolen. There's fraud. The media doesn't get to a point, blah, blah, blah. There's no the states haven't even certified yet. None of that is different. The states hadn't certified it in 2016 when Hillary Clinton conceded. All of this is propaganda. Total propaganda. And no one believes that it's possible for a legal victory here because of votes. Okay? So again, it's just amazing how people are so prone now to propaganda. So, but anyway, I just want you to understand that. So continuing, it says, but with the prediction, Biden came out on the Friday night, this day of November 6th, and thought it would be like a victory speech. It had to wait another day. But he came out on that Friday night, which was this transit that I saw. This is the transit that I saw would be that it would be over by that time. And I saw this moment when Biden and Harris came out on the Friday night as a moment where it's going to be obvious. Now, by this time, it's going to be obvious. And that's when it was obvious. So I got that moment right as well. And it was because of this sensitive point of Saturn opposite Trump's Venus and Biden's exalted Jupiter. That was really kind of like a linchpin for me of deciding which one is this going to favor the most. And so this is still an important point, and I'm going to come back to it in a minute when I look at the current astrology and where it's going forward. But this is also the the current situation is Saturn is still here and Jupiter was here. Jupiter's going to move up and start hitting these points in the next couple weeks. Again, this is going to be certainly benefit Biden more. I'll just tip my hand. When Jupiter moves up and also hits these points, it's going to be aspecting Biden's exalted Jupiter in the 9th, Trump's, very difficult Venus in the 12th house, and it'll eventually it'll confer the blessing to Biden, just like I said that this Saturn really conferred the blessing to Biden, because it's aspecting his exalted Jupiter, and the moon passing over that a few days after the election is when it would be known. And that's what I'm still saying. That same sensitive transit point is what's going to be going forward, as well as the upcoming eclipse, which I'll talk about in a minute. But to continue with the prediction, I said, but Trump will do everything possible to muck it up and declare fraud, etc. But I don't think he prevails. So again, I was talking about this pre-election and also while the election was getting worked out. He's going to do everything he can. He's still doing it. I don't think he prevails, and I definitely don't think he prevails now because it gets more and more obvious this election was not close. This would be more dangerous if it were a close election. If it were down to one state or something, then it could be much more dangerous. But it's not. It's nowhere possible that, for example, there's the kind of fantasy of the electors. There's going to be enough faithless electors that they're not going to ratify it in the Electoral College and all this and all these other things going forward. There is no way that this many faithless electors in this many states are going to back a loser like this. I just cannot conceive of it. Look, if I'm wrong, I'll come out and say I was wrong. I have no problem doing it. None whatsoever. But there's just go against the will of the people in an election that wasn't even close. It's not going to happen. If it does happen again, and talk about civil war, I don't really know what to say, but you just cannot conceive of state legislatures overturning the will of their states who legally cast ballots with no lawsuits even sticking whatsoever, and they're not going to. They're not going to overturn these certified, ratified vote counts in these states. Again, if I'm wrong and something comes out, I will clearly come forward and say, all right, I got this wrong. I promise you I'll do it. Okay? I just don't see it. I don't see it in the astrology. And I also just don't see how again, it's just like a pipe dream that somehow all of these people are going to rally around Trump and completely throw the entire nation and world into upheaval by not ratifying the results of a legitimate election where there's not even a whiff of a credible lawsuit. Now, again, you might be thinking, well, you wait, it's going to happen. Okay, I'm waiting. It's a week. It's 10 days after the election now. Bring it forward. It's literally, I'm doing this on November 13th. The election was November 3rd. If it's coming, it ain't coming fast enough. And again, but anyway, I just don't think he prevails. And again, you can read through all of this. There are other things here. And again, I want to say this was a prediction for these election results. We have several twists and turns that occur after the election that might make things very interesting, most notably the eclipse season. So that's what I'm talking about now, is these other twists and turns. And by the way, just to look at the charts that I was talking about, again, I'll put the link to this case study here, but this is what I was talking about. Here's Trump's chart, and here's Biden's chart. And I was talking about this Saturn, 2 degrees of Saturn in Capricorn aspecting Trump's 2 degrees of Venus here, which is the 10th Lord in his 12th. That was the big one that I thought you have to really look at this transit. And it's aspecting Biden's Jupiter, exalted Jupiter, in the 9th, also on election day. So Saturn was aspecting Biden's Jupiter. It still is. Aspecting Biden's Jupiter and Trump's Venus. And again, to make the prediction, I'm like, who is it going to benefit here? Biden and his exalted Jupiter in the 9th, or Trump this weak, again, 10th Lord in the 12th. And clearly I came out and said, this is going to be much more beneficial for Biden. And I'm talking about it now because what's going to happen, like I said, is Jupiter in the sky now is going to move over that same point. Jupiter is going to join Saturn, and it's going to hit that same aspectral point. Jupiter is going to be about 2 degrees of Capricorn in early December, late November, early December. And this is when electors are going to come forth and whatnot. And again, Jupiter is going to confer that aspect to Biden's Jupiter and to Trump's Venus, and it'll be more beneficial to Trump. To Biden. Now, again, I just want to also go over a few things here. Look, we've already had unprecedented levels. There's been no credible, not even anyone around Trump, that includes his own government, Fox News, everybody who knows has said this is done. You should now, even, Geraldo Rivera, Tucker Carlson, you're going to see more and more. Eventually, maybe he's waiting for Sean Hannity to say, Mr. President, you're hurting your reputation now. It's time to give it up. Fox News, all of them now realize, okay, now for the good of the country, we do still live in a country. It's not Trump land. It's the USA. Even for the good of your own legacy and your own future, which, of course, that's the only thing that matters to Trump is himself and what he gets out of it, you should concede and say you're going to run in 2024 or whatever the heck else is that you're waiting for. His own DHS came out and said, this is the most secure election. Of course, I know people are going to say, that's just the deep state. Okay, whatever. But these are the people that looked over election results. And again, to many of us, it's kind of repugnant to just this election and election officials and poll workers. These are people doing a thankless job, and they're just descended upon now by all these conspiracies, baseless claims. Again, holding up a stack of affidavits and whatnot. Even if all of those votes were changed, there's nothing irregular about this. Biden could also unleash an army of people to find irregularities. Hillary Clinton could have done it in 2016. You can do it in every election. There are irregularities. That's not fraud. Fraud is a crime charged against individuals. And individuals who commit voter fraud are subject to criminal punishment. These election officials and poll workers are not going to perpetrate open fraud. There is so much, and then go to jail. By the way, there was a Republican election official, I don't remember where, who has been found to be fraudulent, to perpetrate fraud. I don't remember where it was from, but that's the only case that I know of in the election so far where that's happened. So again, all of this, we live in a time now where there's no consequence for just hurling the most vile accusation at people with no proof. And it just spreads like crazy. And so it moves the bar so far to the, literally like the conspiratorial, unproven extreme. And it even to just come out and say, none of this is proven, none of this is real. And even if it was, it would have to happen at a scale that we've never seen. And then the response is, oh, well, you just believe in mainstream media, or whatever it is. The retort comes back and makes it seem like, oh, well, okay, who knows? We know. The DHS said no. Nearly 80% of Americans say Biden won the White House. Again, this includes more than half of Republicans. People have, we get it. By the way, this was a few days ago. This was on November 10th. That was 3 days ago. It might be 90% now. Again, just hanging on for what? It's not only do they believe it, they should believe it because we have experience in seeing this. Again, could Trump really hold on? Why experts aren't worried? There's no path for this. Again, what is he thinking is going to happen? That all these faithless electors aren't going to actually ratify the results? Maybe he's waiting for all the votes to be counted. Okay, that's fine. But in the but the part that's not fine, it's not fine to say, well, he deserves to wait to have all the votes counted. Okay, does he deserve to keep saying that it's a hoax and that it's a fraud and that he already won? Again, we've gotten so normalized. We've gotten so used to just abhorrent, hurling, reckless accusations from the president of the United States that were like, well, he's got the right to wait. Okay, he could wait. But he could also not agitate a situation and incite just baseless fury around the country, particularly when there's like no, almost zero chance that anything could work. Who knows if he even understands what needs to happen? I doubt that he does. And even in this article, it says the same thing. It's not even clear if he even understands what it would take. You can't just go into a court and claim fraud. There's fraud. A lawyer has to show it, and then it has to change votes. That's a big, tall order. So again, the New York Times called officials in every state, no evidence of voter fraud. Karl Rove, who engineered George Bush's election, say simply it won't be overturned. Even Tucker Carlson, there's no fraud to change election results. We need to be honest. Yes, need to be honest here. Now, again, that was a few days ago. So again, you wonder to what extent this is going to continue. So again, I know there are especially some astrologers, and I haven't seen their predictions so much, especially the specifics. I've looked at a couple, and when they get to the specifics of what they think will happen, it's kind of hard to listen to because it's so unspecific. But look, if I'm wrong and all this changes and somehow some unicorn flies up and suddenly it happens with Trump and something we've never thought of happens, I'll come out and say, wow, I was totally wrong. And you astrologers who predicted that, awesome. You are great. And by the way, I also just want to say this. I'm not against any astrologers making these predictions. These predictions are hard. And I commend all astrologers who put the time into doing this. I commend all of the astrologers who have the guts to put their predictions on the line like I've done. And I'm not, against you. And I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong or what have you. Again, it takes a lot of guts to put your predictions on the line. Again, my view is that there's, just because I also know how elections work and whatnot, that I just don't see it. So but I'm not trying to mock people who have made these predictions. Again, if you're right and something happens, somehow, again, you get all these faithless electors, or somehow it gets thrown to these states and all this happens because of something that also comes out that we don't see yet. Okay, I'll come out and say, wow, I absolutely did not see that happening, because I don't see it happening. I just don't see it. So again, I just want to be clear about that. What I do see happening is what I saw from the beginning, that Biden was going to win. It's probably going to be much easier than we thought. It's not going to be all this social chaos. It's not even going to drag out for a long time. Because I also want to go back and remember that when I made the prediction, this was before the election. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if Trump was going to win by a landslide. We didn't know if it was going to be neck and neck and really close, maybe coming down to like one state like it did in 2000. That would have been really hard. We didn't know. My prediction was it's not going to be close. We might know on election night or shortly thereafter. And that's what's happened, okay? Minus a miracle that for Trump supporters or what have you, that's what happened. We could be here 10 days later in absolute chaos. One of the reasons why we're not seeing rioting and all kinds of stuff is because it's really not that close. The reason we're even here right now in this moment is because we have a president who just fails in some ways to accept reality, that he has lost. And he's hoping for some miracle. And most of us realize there is no miracle to be had. We have laws. We have reality. It's like praying for the miracle that I will suddenly be able to fly. Again, miracles can happen, but those kind don't. They go against science and numbers. And his science and numbers are getting shot down in courts where you need legal evidence. You need evidence, not just accusation. Again, it's like saying, oh, maybe I'll sprout wings and be able to fly. Okay, maybe. I'm not saying it's absolutely impossible, but I ain't never seen that happen before. It's not Florida in 2000. It's not one state and 500 votes. It's 6 states and tens of thousands of votes. That's what needs to change. With no legal path forward, no credible allegation that's going to change even one vote at this point. Recounts might flip a few hundred votes, not even close to what needs to happen. And if that doesn't happen, it's inconceivable to think that all these state electors are going to just say, oh, no, we want Trump. By the way, I hate to break it to some people, but Trump is really not that popular. He's really not. In fact, this will be the second national election he's lost by millions of votes. Okay? He's the most unpopular president we've had in my lifetime. Not even a close second. So under what conditions would this happen? It's just impossible to really see it. Unless you think just some brute force, strong arm military coup, which frankly, Trump seems like he's trying to play that too and see if that might work by replacing people at the Defense Department and all. Are you cheering for that? Is that what you're cheering for? Okay. I don't know what to say to you there. But that's not a democracy at that point. A brute force coup would not be good. We'll just leave it at that. So let's get to the upcoming transits here. At first, I just want to get, this is the upcoming eclipse that people talk about, and of course, it coincides on the day when we select the electors. It's going to be happening like on the 14th, when the electors are. This is when they're, when they report, when the Electoral College reports. It's going to happen on the eclipse. And again, look at what we have here. We have this eclipse right on Donald Trump's debilitated moon in the 4th house with Ketu. This is going to be where that eclipse happens. Does this look like it's happening right on his debilitated moon, Ketu? I do not see this as a favorable transit for Donald Trump. I think these electors meeting and rendering their final verdict on this election is going to be like Trump. That's like the final, where it's now obvious that, yeah, you're not getting it. Some people have interpreted this, that this shows where he rises from the ashes or something. Okay, that's your prediction. Let's see what happens. I do not see an eclipse on someone's debilitated moon join Ketu as rising from the ashes, particularly not in the dasha that he's in and all the losing that has happened in the dasha of Jupiter, Saturn. Again, if you want to see that in greater detail, you can look at the prediction that I made. But no, I don't see that. By the way, just to even be very specific, it's happening on a debilitated moon in the 4th house. 4th house is also resonance. This could be definitely the transit of someone who's about to change residence. Were you thinking of moving? Well, there's an eclipse on your debilitated moon in the 4th house. And the moon is also the 12th house lord, which, by the way, the moon as the 12th house lord, the 12th house also has to do with prison. And I'm not saying I think he's going to prison. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that the next few months after that moment, there could be a stress and fear and worry about going to prison. We've certainly heard enough talk about that. Again, I'm not going to get into all of that, but That's shown by the eclipse. It doesn't take even any imagination. It's eclipse on his debilitated 12th lord in the 4th house, and it's the moon. And by the way, we also have we have history on our side. We can look at when K2 actually went over these degrees. This is when he got COVID. This is when he had the disastrous debate, and then 2 days later got COVID. That's the effect of K2 going over, of this recurrence transit of K2, especially going over his moon in the 4th house. And again, COVID is a lung malady. If he didn't have the best medical care in the world, he could have died of pneumonia. He probably got pneumonia. All the treatments that happened when he got COVID was a serious health emergency. So even just history, recent history, shows us what this transit's like for him. Again, the transit is still going, and he's lost an election, and he's trying to literally rise from the ashes. Maybe he'll do it, okay? Again, I promise you, if it happens, I will come out and say, I got it wrong. Promise, I will. I just don't see it. And by the way, again, I think it'll be over before that, because Trump is really about self-interest, not the nation's interest or anything else. It'll be over before that. He'll concede before that because of his own interest. And again, we got this transit here. This is this transit of Jupiter that I talked about. We're looking at it here relative to Trump's chart, but this is that Jupiter in early degrees. This is the end of November. So again, we're going to have we're going to have final states certifying their results November 24th, 25th. By November 30th, we're going to know the certified results of all the states, which is what Trump is saying he's waiting for. And everybody is saying, well, the states haven't even certified yet. The media doesn't get to declare a winner. Yeah, okay. Again, propaganda, I get it. Never stopped other people from conceding once they knew they had lost, because we have a higher allegiance to each other as Americans and whatnot, to graciously concede and not turn people against each other. But that's not the game he plays. Okay, so again, propaganda to say the media doesn't decide elections, blah, blah, blah. The people do. So the certified results from all the states will be in by the 30th. They'll probably, I don't remember, it's different for each state, but I think it's the 24th, 25th. So by the end of November, those certified results will be in. And again, Jupiter going into this sign, Jupiter goes in on the 23rd. This is when we start seeing the certified results from the states after November 23rd. And you see Jupiter goes into this same place, this same sensitive point that aspects Biden's Jupiter, Biden's exalted Jupiter. Biden's exalted Jupiter gets an aspect from Jupiter by transit, and Trump's difficult Venus here, his 10th lord in the 12th, also gets the aspect from Jupiter. And again, yes, it's debilitated, but it's still Jupiter's aspect. And again, debilitation isn't a death sentence. It's with its ruler, and it's showing the harsh realities. That's what Jupiter in Capricorn is, showing the harsh realities that inspire some and take others down. So it's going to elevate one and bring another down, just like that Saturn transit on election day that I made the prediction for. The way I called that same aspect between Trump and Biden, again, here's Trump's chart, Venus at 2 degrees. Here's Biden's chart, Jupiter at 2 degrees. And on election day, I had to make that call to see, what is Saturn going to be doing? Who is it going to be helping more, Biden or Trump? And I said it's going to clearly help Biden, and it might even make it quick. That same configuration is going to be visited by Jupiter right after the electors certify the results. So I think if Trump hasn't conceded by then, he will by then, or he will shortly thereafter. I don't think he's going to do it gracious. It might not even be a formal concession, but he'll probably stop the litigation because he'll keep losing. And rather than losing over and over again and loser constantly, and ridicule and come on and everybody abandoning him, which it's getting more and more, it's happening more and more all the time, because even not just Republicans in the Senate, but in the media and people who are trying to maintain some kind of coherent reputation moving forward are like, all right, come on, it's not going to happen. You're embarrassing all of us now, and you're embarrassing yourself. He'll finally be like, okay, and not do a formal concession because he's not gracious, but it'll be something like, it was a hoax, it was stolen, and he'll hang on to that rhetoric. He's not going to let it go, I don't think. But this is what I think will happen. I don't see any way forward where this eventually wins. Again, he's trying, it seems like, especially with moves at the Pentagon and other kinds of maneuvers. But no, I don't think it's going to work, because I also understand the law. I understand how this stuff works. If somehow something happens, I will say, boy, you guys were right. You called it. Something we could have never imagined happened. And man, good job. I don't see it. I don't see any way for it to happen. The mechanisms are in place. There's a certain inertia. It's like gravity. It's like stopping a train. You know, you have to put on the brakes like 2 or 3 miles in advance to get the train to stop. There's a formula to it. This is what people who learn to drive trains learn. At a certain speed and a certain distance, you have to start putting on the brakes this far, or else the train won't stop. There's already inertia. The train is going. We had the election. The votes have been cast. You need to prove they're fraudulent. You've brought forth nothing. Even if you prove that there's fraudulent, or you can find voter irregularities, which could happen, which happens all the time, you have to change tens of thousands of votes in at least 5 or 6 states. This is nothing like 2000, Bush v. Gore, which was 1 state and a few hundred votes. And a slate of electors are not just going to be appointed because they like you or something. They're not going to overturn their state's election results. The results will be certified. They're going to be certified along these lines, and that's it. They're not, whatever sweaty fantasy happens next, like, well, I got the military behind me. I have this lacking now at the Pentagon. I'm not leaving. Who knows what's going on besides that? Again, is it impossible? No, nothing's impossible. It's also not impossible that I would sprout wings and fly. It's also not impossible that somehow, if someone who is driving the train and they don't understand how to stop it could somehow miraculously make something happen. But is it likely? Not only is it not likely, it would require crimes to be committed. I mean, these things are illegal. Electors who aren't faithfully ratifying results, they have to go to courts to get all this stuff to happen. What court is going to say, okay, based on no evidence, we're going to overturn the will of Pennsylvanians so that the legislature can offer up their slate of electors based on no evidence, no fraud, and the fact that Biden won by a couple hundred thousand, by 50 or 60,000 votes, based on no evidence to overdo it. We're just going to do it. If it happens, I will say okay. But something like that needs to happen in like 6 states for probably the most unpopular president we've ever seen, who has lost an election that's not even close at this point. So the danger of him not conceding and continuing all of this is it just keeps all of this hysteria in the bloodstream, which again, as Americans, we've just gotten used to it. But I'm making this video to go back on, to go back and show the prediction that I made. I got it pretty right on. I'm surprised. I also, again, I want to acknowledge all my colleagues. Not all of them are my colleagues. Some people are very hostile, but most the astrologers that I know, whatever it is that they predicted, the fact that you put your work out there on the line, you have my respect. You definitely have my respect. None of the things I'm saying here is a ridicule of anyone's perspective. Even when I'm saying that a scenario I don't understand, I'm not ridiculing you personally. Please hear that. Please, because again, what I'm ridiculing though is these ideas. This false equivalence is just maddening at some point. 4 years ago we could have made the prediction, and again there was some stuff that goes on, but because Hillary Clinton came out and acknowledged and conceded right away, the issue was done. Again, if she would have hung on and done all this, maybe all this would have been happening then. Before that, Mitt Romney conceded. John McCain conceded. We always concede once we realize that it's over. So, again, looking at these scenarios, I don't see anything that is going to change this. It just gets worse for Trump. And by the way, as they count more votes, he gets further behind. It ain't getting any better. Arizona was the one that could have flipped, but it didn't. And it's still still like 11,000 votes, I think. And that's not going to change with recounts. So I already said that. And again, I do appreciate and feel like that we need to come together as a world and stop just getting gaslighted like this. Stop getting triggered and not thinking clearly about stuff. People who I like and respect are just also, they just follow this madness around now. Like, oh, well, God, who knows? The media doesn't decide elections, people do. And they start this sloganeering as well without looking into any of this. Just start repeating this brainwashing, this propaganda. And it's a form of brainwashing. Again, and many times it's the same people who say that everybody's brainwashed by the media. There are people who are going to say that I'm brainwashed by the media, even though this is being widely reported by, quote, the media, including Fox News, because it's fact. We know how elections work. In fact, this whole story that's still afloat is even way more right-wing fringe. It's too right-wing for Fox. Again, you see Sean Hand. I've been watching it to see how they reported it right away. And they right away, the Fox News division was right on. Even the entertainers, Tucker Carlson, Hannity, and Laura Ingraham. Again, it's just, even they're like trying to backpedal from it. It's even more extreme than that now, where they keep this stuff afloat. So again, 80% of the country a few days ago thought this. It's going to get smaller and smaller because there is just no sensible, that we've ever seen, legal basis for anything that's going to happen. We're going to just completely overturn the laws of the country so that we can install the most unpopular president who lost a resounding defeat, lost by more than 5 million popular votes, lost the Electoral College by the same amount he won it by last time, which was, by his own description, overwhelming shellacking, or whatever he called it the last time. Biden won by the same Electoral College amount and more, and a larger margin in every state. Larger margin in every state, and the same numbers. So what we have here is a president who won't concede and has no shame about just making up and hurling accusations that have no basis in fact. Well, the courts do have a basis in fact. You got to prove it. You got to prove that there was fraud, and then that fraud is going to lead to one thing and one thing only, and that's changing votes. That's the only thing that matters. Say all you want. You need to change votes. And again, most hard, rational pragmatists, and I will say adults, in the political sphere that run for office realize, I'm not going to change this many votes. I need to concede for the good of the country. So I'll leave it at that. I'll also have a link to the blog post of my initial prediction. And I hope you